the acts of violence got pretty intense. And there's like bruising on my legs and my arms, and I'm at work and I'm thinking, oh my God, am I going to like lose my job here if I say what is really going on?
Hi everyone, it's Henrietta and Heather, and welcome to a Millennial Podcast where we dive deep into the life of our 30s.
We'll discuss our struggles, dreams, relationships, icks, and anything millennials can relate to. Sit back, relax, and let's head on this journey together. We are 30s Unfiltered.
Hi everyone, welcome back to 30s Unfiltered. I'm Henrietta, and as always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host Heather. Today's episode is an important one. We're talking about a topic that affects so many people's lives, but it often doesn't get the attention it deserves: domestic violence.
That's right. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we wanted to bring attention to this crucial issue. To help us understand it better and talk about the work being done to support survivors, we have a very special guest with us today, our good friend Debbie Lopez. Debbie is on the board for House of Ruth, an incredible organization that works to support survivors of domestic violence. So without further ado, let's welcome Debbie into the podcast.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. It's so nice to meet you.
Here, Henrietta.
Yes,
How are
I feel like
you?
you guys know each other already.
I know.
If you don't. I've talked to Debbie so much about the podcast.
I love it.
It's like so exciting that you're here today.
Yay.
Same
Yes.
here.
So Debbie, thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a bit about your background?
My name is Debbie Lopez. I just turned 60, so I'm in a new phase of life. I retired in January of 2021 after 35 years of law enforcement for a large city in Los Angeles. Through those 35 years, I worked, I started out in patrol, working in black and white. And I, gradually promoted up to the different ranks. I had very good work assignments. Probably the two fun ones were working vice. I got to be a prostitute. And I got to work undercover. Also, my other good job was I was a narcotics canine dog handler. So my partner was a dog. And that was probably the best partner that I could ever have, with a dog.
Yeah.
So from there, I promoted a little bit more to detective, where I ultimately retired as a detective supervisor, where I was able to manage and oversee lots of criminal cases as well as personnel issues and, working with the community. And, there's that sense of help that you want to help the community. That's where the heart lies, is in the service, in being of service.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And currently, since my retirement, I was elected to be on a board of a women's domestic violence shelter, which is the House of Ruth, where they support all the survivors, men, women, and the children, of domestic abuse. Lots of outreach programs, a lot of mental health programs. There's a shelter that's a confidential shelter that they have, located throughout the cities. And, the goal is to break that cycle and to bring awareness, through the high schools and through the elementary schools and to survivors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Yeah, I mean, obviously I've picked your brain so much about your law enforcement background, but I know Henrietta would love to ask you some questions.
Sure.
Go for it, girl.
For sure.
So how old were you when you started working as a cop?
I had just turned 23, and
Wow.
I initially wanted to be a teacher. I was going to school to be a teacher, bilingual education, elementary school. And I think at that point, I realized I didn't really care for kids. I didn't have the patience.
I get it.
Which is so ironic.
No
yeah.
judgment.
Right. But I have always played softball, growing up in high school, college. And my sister at the time was already a police officer. So she played on a women's softball team, for the department that she worked for.
Mm-hmm.
And I was invited to come play because their third baseman didn't show up. So, at that time I still played tournaments and, I was pretty active, and I started to play with these women. And I think after the game, I remember them all circling me and saying, "Oh my God, you got to be a cop. You can play softball." And I was like, "Really?" So 6 months later, I was in the police academy, and that's what that was my intention. That's what drew me, was to play softball for a police department and be a cop.
Wow.
So I always thought I'd use my teaching, in the department, but that didn't really surface. It was just the fun, being out in the street, the adrenaline. Every day's different.
Yeah.
There's that, the adrenaline that comes with it. Yeah.
Is there anything that you want people to know about like being a cop in LA? Because I mean, I don't know if you're aware, but we have listeners like in Norway as well, because that's where I am. And I do know, and I also think that a lot of people outside of the US don't have the best view on US police force. But I mean, I've lived in the States for a long time, but I've mainly lived in LA. And obviously there's always going to be someone who ruins everyone's reputation, and those are the ones that you hear the most. So I'm curious, like, is there anything that you want to like shine a light on? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. I think for myself, what I can honestly and heartfelt say is that there is that desire to serve the community, first and foremost. That's the attraction. I mean, that's what's there for us. It's, I think when I came on, sure, it was to play softball, but once I was enmeshed, you just saw the calling that was there for you. And, there's different career routes you could have gone through. Certainly if that wasn't for you, you could have found yourself another position in an administrative position. Or for me, it was being out in the community because I was from the community and to make a difference. And just to know that you can make a difference in someone's life was priceless. I mean, there were several times where you'd get a call and you see these, especially the kids. Even though I didn't want to be a teacher, I guess I didn't have the patience, but it was just the kids just coming up to you and just giving you a hug. Like, thank you. For
goosebumps.
Right.
So sweet.
And it was, and then to get maybe later on down the road, letters from a victim who you helped.
Wow.
You just thought it was just a radio call, and just those words that you shared with them, or the support that you provided them, that really didn't have to deal with the job. They'd send you a thank you letter, and it was just something totally unexpected. So like you say, there's always those bad outlooks on every career.
Around it.
Yeah, on every career. It's always there. It could be any line of work. But I can truly say from the organization that I came, 99.9% are there to help the community. It's those 0.1% that do ruin it for the rest. And again,
Exactly.
we're human. And that's the humanness of the job. Sure.
Yeah. And it feels like somehow your life, like, and if it's not, if that's not the case, please correct me, but it feels like your life has come full circle with you now, like being on the board of House of Ruth and continuing your work. And I think it's absolutely amazing. So for those who have only kind of heard about the term domestic violence, they might know someone who's gone through it, or they have friends of friends who've gone through it, but they don't really know the depth of it. Could you explain what it encompasses? Like, what are some signs that people might not immediately recognize as like abuse? Like the first, not even red flag, but the first like orange flag.
Just some key points, just so it's very listener friendly, not the too technical, so that it's just readily available. But domestic violence is a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to control, to harm a partner, and to maintain their power over them. And it could cross any age or gender, any socioeconomic status. It could be in any industry. It could be a professional. It could be a housewife. There's no boundary. And it produces an intergenerational cycle where soon, the children and the relatives soon believe that it's accepted or condoned. And that's the cycle that needs to be broken. And that's where the education component comes in. And to understand it, there's, I like to say that there's 6 different aspects of it. There's emotional, which is the intimidation, the coercing, the harassing. There's sexual, where it's forced, sexual acts. There's physical abuse, which is pretty self-explanatory, physical violence. There's threats of abuse, the conditional. I'll do this. This will happen to you if you don't do this. There's the financial withholding, maybe somebody who's a housemaker. It could be either male or female. I've seen both, in different relationships where the financial means is withheld. So there's that control. And there's also digital now, which is something that's coming up newly because of the, the era that we're in with cell phones and, photos that get, sent across the internet, the threats of that, very intimate photos. So there's those means of control in that relationship where the one person tends to have the upper hand or the perceived upper hand, which in fact, that's their inability to cope with the loss of their control.
Right.
And, and as far as a relationship, the way we would define it, it's any gender. It could be a cohabitating relationship. It could be in a marriage. It could be in a dating relationship, but it's been ongoing dating relationship, or they have children in common. Again, and it also could extend to relatives. It could be, mother, father, son, mother, anything that's in a household that we would look at as in a household. Even though the end result in the courts may be a little bit different, but as far as the spousal versus, the family violence, there's a little bit different delineation, but I won't go into that. But that's just what encompasses, what a domestic violence, scenario might look like. And there's different cycles of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like a huge range, right?
Yes.
Well, what are do you know some of the common misconceptions about?
We can relate that back to it's a simple, ideology. It's called the cycle of violence, and it starts out with attention. In all relationships, there's tension. There's financial straits, there's stressors, but, the aggressor has an innate desire to maintain control. And when they start losing that control, because there's just some things we just can't control in life. We can't control financial. We can't control what happens at work. There's a tension building stage. And, people will, sometimes, like myself, we just look at it as, oh, that's just, working at a relationship. We kind of sell it off as something and we minimize it because that's what we do. And then there's an incident that'll occur as a result of the blow up stage is tension. And that could be physical. It could be acts of threats, violence, sexual acts, the manipulation. That's the actual explosive incident that occurs in that relationship. But it's also, if there's the education component's not back there, it's not going to be a red flag. It's just going to be something, oh, that's just something that happens in a relationship, especially if it's an intergenerational kind of a concept that has happened in their growing up. That's just what happens. Mom and dad did it, so I guess it's okay. It's just accepted. And then the next stage will be the reconciliation stage. And that's where there's the extra love, there's that extra kindness. It's the gifts, it's the promises that I'll never do this again. I promise, I love you. All of that stuff that we want to hear.
The love bombing.
The love bombing, that's what we want to hear. So there's that decompression that kind of happens in that stage. Right. And then you have the calm. Then once all that's, been, communicated, the calm is where the control starts to kick in again. And people, I think a lot of them miss this part where it's the justifying why I did what I did. There's the minimization of it. Well, it really wasn't that bad. It was just something that happens in a relationship.
Yeah. There's
the continued empty promises. Then the little gaslighting kind of starts there. And then, the emotional, play will kick in full gear. And then it just starts over again with the tension. And what happens is that continues to happen. And again, you have to look at the family dynamics. For myself, what I could speak of is that I grew up in a 2-parent home. I was never exposed to any of this. And so that's where the control and the tension come in, because pretty soon that partner will isolate you from the family.
Yeah.
There's that isolation. So there are lines of communication. You're not as free with your words, with your family, and to be able to talk about it, because there's a level of embarrassment. I just played out there, embarrassed that this has happened to me. And then dual sided was, I'm embarrassed, and here I am, a cop. I'm out there enforcing this, being somebody who I have to be at work. And then there's a real Debbie at home that was subjected to this. So who do you talk about? Who do you talk about it to? Because, that's where the isolation and the embarrassment comes in. So you don't talk about it and you just bury it, and it continues.
Would you say that is a typical pattern of domestic violence, where it kind of starts maybe with like the love bombing, and then whatever red flag or whatever, if it's whether it's physical, threatening, emotional, whichever one of the violences that they use, and then it'll slowly go back to like the love bombing. So kind of like it's this vicious circle. Like that is the typical pattern.
Yeah, for young girls, I can give this, and I talk about it to some of the courses that I teach, is that for young girls who maybe don't come from that environment, you confuse control with, oh my God, he just wants to be with me. He just wants to be around me. Oh my God, how great to feel wanted.
Right.
He wants to go with me everywhere. And it feels good. And let's just, admit it. It feels good to have that partner that you want to be with, but that's the establishing of the control. And that's, I think, a huge red flag that young girls and young men who haven't had that background get confused. And that's where I got confused. And, and usually the incident stage where there is actual physical violence, that doesn't typically happen right away.
Right.
That's just,
It's a buildup.
It's a buildup. It's a verbal, and then it goes into the reconciliation. Like, oh, I'm sorry I said that, and then the love bombing, and then the calm, and then it starts over. So it's a gradual. So when I've encountered women where I had to interview them for their particular case, this is ongoing. This isn't just a one-time incident. I mean, there are those incidents where it had happened, maybe on a one-time basis where they were able to get out of it and the police intervene. But for the majority of them, it's a gradual foundation of control that has been established.
So now that people, recognize the pattern and they're just like, oh, I'm in this pattern, how do I get out? So how does the House of Ruth support survivors, and what services do they offer to those affected by domestic violence?
By the time I believe, that they do come to a shelter or a community like the House of Ruth, this is something that's been ongoing for a while. This is almost to the point where you're almost at the end of your rope. It's gotten very violent. The police have intervened. You've gotten a referral to a shelter or an organization or support group to help you with this. Because I believe that, initially ongoing, a domestic violence victim is not going to seek help themselves. It's unfortunate because that's just a cycle that, people can't recognize initially. From the outside looking in, I'm sure the whole family will see it if they were privy to it. Right. But from the inside out, that you're the last person to really distinguish that. So, the first step is to acknowledge that this is happening. And that comes with education and the education component. And that's something that a lot of the shelters will provide the support with the women to acknowledge it. However little it may seem or insignificant that act was, it's a foundation that has been built throughout the relationship. So, in a nutshell, to get out of it, you first have to acknowledge that it's occurring and to be able to be in a safe place to talk about it. Because again, if it got so violent, the police intervened, chances are she's not going to want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's an ongoing process where there's the need for, counseling, support, and again, the first time event, the court system will maybe, depending on the injuries, if there are injuries, if they're so severe, depending on the situation, the court may try to, send them both to counseling.
Yeah.
And then again, that could, hopefully provide them the support that both need to heal, or it could further enmesh that person into that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of, can you share, you don't have to give too much details, but could you share a success story that you specifically helped someone with their situation?
Yeah, I was working in Hollywood division, and there was a lady, with her two kids, where she really got pretty physically hurt, and I remember my partner and I at the time were like, oof, this is tough. It still gets me emotional to think about it, but
yeah, I bet.
I remember taking her two kids to McDonald's, take the kids to go get something to eat, just to get them away from that place.
Wow.
And we were able to refer her at that moment to a shelter. And, I guess at the time you're thinking, okay, let's just see how long. It's a matter of time before we have to go back to this house because you know it's going to happen again. And I think at that moment, we had gotten a call from our sergeant. And they wanted us to come to the station. We're just like, oh, what did we do? Right? Because, you know, when you get called by a supervisor, you think, okay, I did something wrong. No, it was her. She actually came to the station to thank us.
Wow.
With her kids, to say that because of those acts of kindness, to be able to get her in a place that would help her. Not that we did anything really to help her, you know, get out of it. It was just that the time that we took to take her children out, to get them something to eat and to refer her to a place that provided her with support.
Oh,
huge.
so that was not while you were with House of Ruth. That's
No. This was when I was working. Yeah. That one really stands out for me, you know. But as far as, you know, the House of Ruth, you know, there are different events where there was one where it was called the Survivors Panel, where you got to share your story. And you're sharing your story, like I shared my story a little bit with you guys about what I went through. And, you know, the audience was primarily the survivors who are still seeking, you know, help. And just to let them know that I'm sitting up here right now telling my story, but that could be them.
Yeah.
There's no difference. Just because I did what I did for a living, there's no difference of who we are as people. I could still be on that other side as well. And just to get them present that it doesn't have to be that way. You can make a change. And, you know, getting present to your ability to get through it and work and heal.
Okay. Well, Debbie, I just like rewinding back, I acknowledge you for, you know, your big heart and your kindness, supporting that family and those kids. That is really courageous. And I just really feel the love. And so I'm so grateful there are people out there like you supporting the community. And it's really moving. I did want to ask, would you like to share your story? You know, the story that you share with the women in the shelters.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a little bit what we talked about. I just explained to them, you know, who I was. You know, I was a law enforcement officer for 35 years. And I shared with them early on, you know, while going through the police academy, I was married. And again, you know, when we talk about, I confused control and love. It was jealousy. It was jealousy. He always wanted to be around me. Where are you? What are you doing? And I took it as, oh my God, he just wants to be with me, you know? And it, you know, again, you know, in a dating relationship, it's getting to know the family. A lot of times the relationship is exclusively these two people. And a lot of the times, especially for that other partner who probably has that history, they will isolate you from their family. And I think that was another big red flag that I missed. Again, I wasn't aware of it, where I was really isolated from his family. I mean, I met the parents, I met the siblings, but I really wasn't enmeshed with the family. And I think that insight early on would have given me more red flags, but they were missed.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, right, because that was something that he grew up with. Mom and dad did the same thing. So again, it was passed on. So again, you know, throughout the relationship, he would control, where are you going? What are you doing? There's a lot of physical violence. And it was stuff like, oh, you're a cop. What are you going to do about it?
Oh, wow.
You know, it was just that constant challenging. You know, again, you know, I'm a cop at work, but I'm not a cop at home.
Yeah.
That's not who I am. I'm Debbie at home. You know, I'm a woman. I'm a wife. So there was that control. Then it came to the point where the acts of violence got pretty intense. And I remember going to work. And I was in the academy still. You know, you're in shorts and t-shirts because you're in the physical field. And there's like bruising on my legs and my arms. And I remember one instructor, she's pretty attuned. And of course, I denied. She says, how'd you get all these bruises? You know, and I'm just like, again, you know, I'm embarrassed. I'm at work and I'm thinking, oh my God, am I going to like lose my job here if I say what is really going on? And who am I going to talk about it to? I says, oh no, ma'am. You know, it was from physical therapy, you know, the physical, you know, training that we're doing. I must have hit myself. And she remember her looking at me saying, if you ever want to talk, come talk to me. But I shut that door because that was something I wasn't going to talk about. So again, moving forward, you know, throughout that relationship, and it was only like a 5-year relationship. I remember going to work and he would follow me at home. He would follow me to work He would follow me home.
Wow.
It was just that's constant stalking. And I remember thinking, I hate this guy. You start thinking all these things, and then you tell yourself, I got to leave. But how do you leave? How do you leave? It's just, there is just such an emotional control that they have on you. It's hard to explain once you've been there, but looking at it from the outside in, there's a lot of embarrassment. There's a lot of low self-esteem as a result of the constant gaslighting that comes with it. And then you're constantly looking at yourself like, I'm broken, I got to fix. Or it's like, who else is going to want me? Because I'm broken. So there's all these controls that we perceive that are true, but they really aren't. It's just what we've been diminished to in the relationship.
And it's your current life. So of course that's how you're gonna feel, because that's how your everyday is like.
Right. Yeah, and I consider myself one of the lucky ones. I mean, because I had that other side of it, the law enforcement side of it, where I could kind of sometimes step outside of my environment and see this is where it's really headed. Well, and it wasn't until I had my daughter that I realized, and I think, having a child changes your life.
I was going to ask you, was that your tipping point?
Yes, it was. It was my tipping point, having my daughter, because that was, my focus. That was my pride and joy, and that's who I was there to protect.
Right.
And, hell hath no fury like a mama bear, right?
Exactly. And Henrietta, her daughter is also a cop.
Come on, this is awesome.
Yeah, no. So what can people do to raise awareness about domestic violence, especially during this month, Domestic Violence Awareness Month?
A few suggestions are, get involved with your local shelters. There's a lot of women in need. There's a lot of things that we take for granted, how many of us can open our closets and say, oh my God, look at all these clothes I have. What am I going to do with all these clothes? And we think about, we'll have a garage sale, or let me just, put it on eBay. But think about the women who are in these situations where they just basically up and leave with the clothes on their back.
Yeah.
That's all they have, because they're out of there. There's a lot of need for clothing, which sometimes we don't think about. And there's a big need for the food banks that are supporting, the shelters, and, there's a lot of volunteer programs that they do have, for victim advocates, or just, sometimes you need somebody to talk to, and a lot of times, I know me and Heather have talked about this before. When we perceive people of authority, what do? We shut down. So I can see where, sometimes if we're talking to, say, like a psychiatrist or psychologist or a doctor, we kind of perceive them, especially coming from a domestic violence, situation. Persons of authority can be very threatening, because we kind of go back to our abuser, because we see them as that potential person of authority over our lives. So but being able to be,
I think with that too, I think it's also, we want to protect the abuser, right?
Right. At that moment, you don't want to share everything that's going on. And having somebody who's kind of like you, somebody who's like me, I can talk to, versus somebody who I perceive as person of authority, who could potentially make a change for me. Maybe I'm not ready to make a change.
Makes sense.
Yeah, like, why would I want to talk to a police officer that he's, hurting me at home? Because if I do, then he's going to go arrest him. I just want to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the whole, because this is something that I've always wanted to do, is donate my clothes. I have a ton of clothes I want to donate, but what stops me is I go on the website and they say they want new clothing, or there's like criteria. And so I just bring it to Goodwill. But I would love to donate it to, shelters. I just don't know where.
Yeah, I know House of Ruth is one of many organizations, and there's other ones located in different areas of the city and in the States and in the world that would accept it. As long as they're clean, they're, slightly used. Again, because this is an emergency shelter. These are emergency locations, and they're not really looking for brand new stuff. They're just looking for something to get them through that situation they're in. And, food banks, providing, extra food because, say, they just left the house. So that's all they have. They're in a hotel, they're in a motel, they're in a temporary housing facility. with no money, because again, maybe financially they may not be able to support themselves. So they need, there's a need there, as well as monetary need as well, always.
Okay. So, Debbie, how can someone help a loved one who they suspect is experiencing domestic violence?
I would say the best support is, remember, they're not going to want to publicly talk about it. They're going to be embarrassed about it. But I think you need to have that hard conversation with them and just let them know, I see what's happening. I understand, you don't not want to talk about it, but it's not healthy. And then maybe provide them with some resources. Because again, it's kind of like, I look at it this way, as families, sometimes, we get into that space of, don't tell me what to do. Mm-hmm. And hearing it from somebody, may come across that way. But just letting them know that you're acknowledging that you're seeing that there is something happening, and maybe provide them with some kind of resource, or encourage them and ask them, you want me to go with you? Give them that support to help them get that help that they need. Because a lot of times, we as a loving family member may make it worse.
Yeah.
By trying to intervene. And, then again, that gives the abuser another reason to further isolate them. Because you don't want to enmesh yourself too much in that relationship, because that other person, remember, that's the controller. They're going to further pull away. So you want to be able to have a relationship with that person, but yet not so much that they're just totally going to detach. And that would happen if that is being seen by that other person.
Yeah, I was going to say, what if your friend it's clearly going through something? What if they are just say no, kind of being on offense mode, and oh no, it's not, kind of deflecting and getting maybe upset about being upset with the person trying to help? Is there any different way to do it? Because obviously you don't want to ostracize, you don't want to be ostracized for asking.
For me, what would have helped, probably, I can speak for myself, is maybe having that loving friend or family member just encouraging me that it's not okay, that it's not my fault. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times we internalize it. It's my fault. I asked for this. It's all my fault. If I hadn't have done this wouldn't have happened. But to let them know that you're kind of seeing it, mm-hmm. and that you're there to support them. But to let them know that, it won't get better until you get help. And it's not to say that you want them to leave that person, because I think that's our first instinct is just to get out. Yeah. But maybe they don't want to leave. Maybe they just need to work on it together, and maybe they can both heal. Again, who are we to make that determination for them? You will leave that relationship when you had enough. Yeah. Or if it rises to the level of physical harm.
Mm-hmm. Debbie, in closing, in your experience, what role does community play in helping survivors of domestic violence rebuild their lives?
Educating our young, upcoming kids, children, nieces, nephews, cousins. It's never too early to introduce them to that educational component. Violence is not okay. Yelling is not okay. Hitting is not okay. Controlling is not okay. And, and for the, middle-aged school, give them an example of what controlling looks like, because we can talk about it, but if we don't give them the concrete examples, they're not going to get it. They're not going to see it, Mm-hmm. So again, it's just the education, to prevention. And that would, look at the prevention of it, and having that open dialogue, and it starts out young, because that's where it starts.
Because obviously, it should start at in your home with your parents, but what if they're the ones that are actually the ones that are abusing? So, right. Do you think that every school should? I believe the schools do have a component.
I know many shelters and organizations do go into the junior high schools, at the junior high school level, even the elementary school, the upper grades.
Yeah.
And they do have the presentations, especially in junior high. High school sometimes, not to say that it's too late, but by then some of the behavior is already so ingrained, Yeah. But it's the, higher, elementary school, middle schools that it's extremely important. And they do have that intervention there. Sure.
That's
Yeah.
good.
I think also when you're if your family is like that, it's just part of the cultural,
Acceptance. Yes.
Right, right. And so what message would you give to someone who is currently experiencing domestic violence but doesn't know how to seek help? Like with the whole education aspect, like what would they do?
My best advice would be is look for your nearest, for your own inquiry. Again, it's confidential. You can make that number. If you look up on it on a website, it's easily erased. It's not tracked. That's how they're designed, to be immediately erased. If you're in fear, inquire and look into it and see that you are not the blame. Just get that it's not your fault. And that will, really become apparent once you seek that help and, just being able to talk to somebody about it.
Yeah. So for your House of Ruth work, do you go still to like houses and visit or like help get the victims out, or do everyone come to House of Ruth to seek help?
Yeah, that particular organization, it is community based. Like I said, a lot of the women there is a hotline that it's a hotline that they will, like a crisis intervention, they will, man that 24/7. A lot of the times they're getting referred through different law enforcement agencies in the area where, there was an incident that occurred and there's that necessity to provide them with that safety for that night or for that day. They'll get referred there, for housing, emergency housing. Also, there's a lot of community outreach programs where they provide the education, if they are in that type of situation, but they're not ready to leave yet. A lot of women are looking for, support, but they're still living in that household. So they can come there in a confidential basis to look and seek support and help and help them design a plan to help them get out.
Yeah.
And I think that's huge, because if you think we can't do that on our own, we need that help to get out.
Yeah.
And they have legal support, help them with restraining orders. They have like a food bank, if many of them are like just ran away and, they're in a hotel or somewhere, there's a lot of support there.
Yeah. Are most of them women or girls that you work with, or is it a mix of both?
I would say primarily there's the majority is a lot of women, but there are men who have come to this shelter for support. Because men can be victims as well. I've been yes, and for the male, population, that's even a deeper population to even reach, because men traditionally won't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for joining us today and shedding light on such an important topic. And the work that you do and House of Ruth are doing is truly life-changing for so many people. And I'm sure it is a lifeline for a lot of people who might be at their very end of like, I cannot handle this anymore. And so we are so grateful to have had this conversation with you today.
Yes.
Both. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Debbie. And yes, as you know, our podcast is all about embracing life in our 30s and giving an unfiltered look at what it means to navigate in this phase of life. So before we wrap up, we'd love to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
If you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your 30-year-old self?
Communicate what it is that I'm going through and not be concerned about what other people would think of me. Just being free with my words, because that was probably one of the key components that would hold you back, is not being able to talk about it. Right. Yeah. And go with your gut. Honestly, we all say, oh, well, kind of go with your gut, but what does that really look like? When you think about it, you see it, you're experiencing it, but what do? We kind of bury it. Pay attention to that, ladies and men. In those relationships, if it doesn't look right, it's not right. And go with it, and just don't compromise yourself.
Yeah.
To accept.
And then what is one mindset that you've adopted in your 30s that has had the biggest impact on your life?
Resilience and never giving up. Yeah. no matter what, because life's happening. And there's peaks and valleys. And as long as you're resilient and you don't give up, you can overcome however difficult it is. Absolutely.
Yeah, life's been lifing, like Heather and I
Always
like to say.
Right.
Life is lifing.
Life
And
is
the 60-year-old would say, don't waste your time on second guessing yourself so much. We kind of question ourselves.
Yeah. What would your 60-year-old self tell you right now? What advice would they give you? Mm-hmm.
Right now, my 60-year-old self would tell me, you've been through some shit, girl.
Mm-hmm.
And, just don't give hope. Don't lose hope. Don't lose sight of, yourself for others. Don't lose sight of yourself for others,
Would you say that you've would you say that this is like your purpose in life?
Yeah, it's come full circle. Sure. I wouldn't be where I'm at had I not experienced what I did when I was younger.
Oh.
Truly. It's totally full circle. And I think that's where, and I am very spiritual. So I think that's, the higher power getting me to where I needed to be able to experience that so that I could share it versus just reading it out of a book and trying to counsel someone. Because I can tell you firsthand what it was like and you can relate to people, and move forward that way. Sure.
Yeah. Can I ask you, what's your sign?
I'm a Virgo. Very earth grounded.
Oh, okay. I know. It's funny. I was just telling Heather that I just looked up my birth chart for the first time a week ago, and I was like, it makes so much sense.
Debbie, I didn't know you're Virgo. No wonder we get along.
Right? You were very grounded, but you're very much a perfectionist, right? Things have to be done a certain way.
Heather? No.
No, not Heather.
No, never.
That's why we got along, because I totally got her, because she got me. And we have to try to have control, huh, girl? Right?
Yes. I think what it is like, for a long time, I let somebody else control me. I let others control me, and for the first time,
because you wanted to go along, to get along, because you didn't want to, put any riff out there, and we just went along with it. But no.
Now I have my voice, and I'm here.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I've never done what anyone else, like when anyone told me to do. And I know now that's the Scorpio in me, because I've always done the complete opposite of what everyone in my hometown is doing, because they're all back here and like they all have kids, they're all like married or in a domestic, relationship, like, and all this stuff. And I'm like, let me go back to LA. Let me go back a third time. Like I've moved back and forth between Norway and LA for 12 years.
Oh.
And I'm still like, I'm back here now, not by choice, by circumstance. And I am gonna, that's my goal. That's my dream, to be living back in LA, living my life. I will not give up. Like, I know what is awaiting for me when I do get there, because it's what makes me happy. And so I know it's worth it. But
and with Heather touched on it, now she has her voice. When you have your voice, you sleep well at night.
Yeah.
Put that out there.
Wow, that is powerful. When you have your voice, you sleep better at night.
Yeah, because you're not thinking about what I should have said or what I didn't say. When you have your voice, you say what's there.
Wow.
There's no second guessing.
I love that.
I love it. That's why I love Debbie.
Again, thank you so much for sharing with us. And before we close, can you tell us where people can find you? And do you have anything upcoming, like any events or any projects that you're working on right now that you would like to share?
Let's see. For the organization, it's called the House of Ruth, and it's located in the city of Pomona, California. And then there's also, the want list, that's coming up, and it's on the website. It details, what is in need, just like any other shelter, maybe in anybody else's geographic area. There's always those websites that will post that. Yeah, that's how you can get a hold of me. Awesome. And I'm on Facebook. I'm not too much on Instagram. I'm not that.
Debbie's huge on Facebook. Okay,
Facebook maybe, but not so much Instagram.
Yes. Oh my God. Well, thank you so much, Debbie. And thank you so much to everyone listening.
Yeah. And both of you girls, ladies, young ladies, you guys are amazing, bringing this to light, because this is something that was not there for us growing up, in our 30s. It just wasn't there. There weren't these podcasts to glean information from. And, my hat's off to both of you. So brave and innovative, both of you, for doing this and sharing it with everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
I love you. Thank you so much for coming on. Oh my God.
Yes.
I can't wait to hear and for you to hear this episode as well.
Thank you so much to everyone listening. We hope this episode gave you some real takeaways. If you're looking for ways to raise awareness and support, reach out to your nearest shelter, or you can visit www.houseofruthinc.org to connect. Debbie and the House of Ruth are truly doing incredible work, and we're so grateful to have had her with us today.
That's right. And if you or someone you know have been affected by domestic violence or any other type of abuse, you can also visit www.wannatalkaboutit.com. Be sure to subscribe, share this episode with someone who might need it, leave us a review, and we will see you on the next one. Hey, thanks for listening. We hope you got some takeaways from today's episode.
You can also follow us on Instagram and YouTube at 30s Unfiltered, or email us at 30sunfiltered@gmail.com.
Please leave us a like, comment, and subscribe to our channels. See you next time.